Welcome back to Season 2 of the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Menninger, and I am so grateful that you're joining us. When I started this podcast last year, my primary goal was to normalize the experience of imposter syndrome, to make it easier for us to talk about, and to access the support that we deserve. I am so grateful to everyone who has shared their stories with me, and I'm fascinated by the linkages between imposter syndrome and so many other facets of our lives. The conversations that we had last season led us in so many powerful directions. I'm excited to continue these conversations in Season 2. As always, if you have a story to share, please reach out to me. I would love to interview you. And if I can ever support you on your own imposter syndrome journey, I'd love to connect on that too. Thanks again for being here. Welcome, Tiffany. I am so excited to talk to you today. And I would love, before we jump in, to just start by asking you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kim. This is such an exciting opportunity and such an important topic. So I'm really excited to kind of dive in with you. So I'm Tiffany Castagno. I am CEO of Zephyr, and we are an HR consulting firm that supports small to mid-sized businesses and helping out with scale, infrastructure, processes, and procedures. So we help organizations build great brands and cultures. And I love the work I do, and I'm so excited by it every day.
I love the work that you're doing too. And so I'm so glad that you got us to connect. So I'll ask you the general questions I ask everybody, which are, what does imposter syndrome mean to you? And how, if at all, has it shown up in your life or in your career?
So this is always an interesting topic, and it's something that we have to dive in deep and inwardly reflect on. For me, it means that we have essentially put all this pressure and all these ideals on ourselves. Maybe that's from the external environment. Maybe it's things that we're working through internally still, but it's trying to move past that. It's really understanding where our strengths are and maybe where we have some opportunities, but it doesn't mean that we're not good at things. So for me, it's really learning where maybe there is some opportunity, but also knowing where you're really strong and not putting all that pressure on yourself to say that you're not something that you really are. So allowing yourself to shine, if you will.
I love that. I think that's such an important point too, because we do have a tendency to be so focused on what we don't have and not so focused on what we already do well, right? And that's just not how we're conditioned to think about ourselves, especially as women. We're often taught to be humble, not to brag, not to really see ourselves individualistically through a lens of strength. And so when all of our attention goes towards the what do I not know, how are other people better than I am, right? There's this inevitable self-doubt that creeps in, and like you're talking about, that pressure and that sense of like, I should be more like that person, or I should be better at this, right? And that's exhausting.
It is. And so you asked also how that has shown up for me, and some of it is just, do I put on a face today? Put on a face. So sometimes we have client meetings or other things, and we need to be a little bit more dressed up or have this forward face. And so I've tried to allow myself some grace there, because just because I'm in a sweatshirt doesn't mean that I'm not still the Tiffany and the CEO of my organization, and that I don't provide value to my clients. So that's something that I've been struggling with a little bit lately. And can I post this video? Am I too casual? Will people see me as professional? Does it mean anything different for me and how I show up for myself in my business? And so that I've been working through myself, but I've also seen, you see a lot of influencers on social media. And so we tend to compare ourselves a lot. And it kind of goes to what you were saying, where we think that we have to do all these things and be all these things, especially as women. We see someone who is maybe where we'd like to be, and then we start doing this comparison, and then the internal dialogue comes about, and it's, well, why don't I have that? Or what do I have to do to get there? And then comes the pressure. So it's being humble enough, but also understanding what gifts we do bring into the world.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying. And I'm curious, as you find yourself, especially when you're talking about can I show up professionally and casually? Can I, be myself, or do I have to put on this other face today? Like, how do you sort through that? What helps you to get to a place where you feel like you're making the right decision for you, or managing some of those pressures? Is there anything that you lean on in terms of mindset shifts or strategies to help you when you're dealing with that kind of pressure?
Yeah, so since it's a very recent thing, because I have clients who will show up to our meetings in a t-shirt, and then I feel like, oh, why am I so dressed up? So then I start to get in my head around that, like, am I like too buttoned up? Is that too much? And so, but what I've really leaned into, Kim, is that I am myself, and I'm 100% authentic all the time. And people are either going to like that or they're not, but we have to, within ourselves, be comfortable enough with that. I know that my clients love me for a reason, and it's because of who I am and also my HR expertise that I bring. But the beauty of that is that I'm not just HR Tiffany. I'm also very kind, positive Tiffany. And I like to have a lot of fun with my work as well, but giving that room for my clients to feel themselves too. And so that they don't have to feel perfect. And so that really for me has been like, yeah, sometimes maybe I can be in a t-shirt or a sweatshirt and let them see that side too. So we all come with so many things that make us uniquely us. And I talk a lot to people about celebrating that. And so if I say that to other people, then that's one of the greatest things that I've been able to manage through this and to use as a tool. If I'm telling other people, bring your authentic whole self, I want to be able to celebrate and be in that pool of individuality too.
I love that. I know it's so hard to practice what we preach, right? It's easier to.
Oh my gosh.
And what you're talking about too, in terms of like showing up in a t-shirt, is also reminding me of what I hear a lot from women and what I experienced myself when I was in the corporate world. I was a lot younger. I was often the only woman in the room. I have more of like a fun, I like to laugh based personality. And so I would often sit in these rooms and think, am I going to be taken seriously? Am I laughing too much? Right? Like, am I smiling too much? Or do they think I'm professional enough? Those types of things. Right. And you get inside your head, and then you start trying to be more of what you think you're not, and it doesn't feel authentic. And then you start to feel forced, and it's impossible to operate with any kind of strength or authenticity once you start doubting whether your own authentic self is okay or is right for the situation that you're in. I love what you're saying about like, people are going to like it or they're not. And we can't expect that everyone's going to like us. Mm-hmm. We just can't. And that, even saying that now, well into life, right? It's hard to say because I'm a people pleaser. I'm somebody who always wants people to like me or to think I'm in the right situation. But if we can just acknowledge that that's an impossible standard to set, which I think is what you and I are talking about too, in terms of everything. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like just the expectations that we put on ourselves. Then we get to decide how we show up and who is important to us, right? And if those people don't like that we showed up in a t-shirt or that we laughed, right? But it is what it is, right?
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry.
Exactly.
I think there's a hashtag.
Now, I wonder, as you and I are talking about this as business owners, if that changes anything. Like, do you think that it's different when you work in a company, when you're working for other people and you don't have necessarily as much freedom or autonomy as you have as a business owner?
That is such a great question. I feel and I'm a newer entrepreneur as of spring. So I think that's why I was putting all that pressure on myself. I'm new. I need to be credible. I need to validate. I need people to see me, that I know what I'm talking about. And so I almost feel like I've put more pressure on myself than when I worked for an organization, because you have that name behind you that's already been established. And so now I'm going out and having to establish that on my own with people who don't know me. I had always had great relationships with the stakeholders within an organization. And so now it's building that fresh, which is the beauty of it, but it's also very intimidating. And I found that I sit more uncomfortable today than I ever have because everything is brand new. I'm loving being uncomfortable, but at the same time, it's like, oh boy, this is really uncomfortable. But I think we always still have to remember that whatever those skills were that I had in the organizations that I sat within, I still brought with me those skills today. And that is how I provide that value to my clients. But in my own head, it's, well, I had tools and resources and a team. And now it's like, well, some of the stuff I have to build like from ground up. And I have to get out of my own way a lot of times to say, you've done this before. Maybe you had a team with you before, and maybe it's going to take you a little or a lot longer. But the beauty of building that is another technique that I use to kind of get myself out of my own way and out of my own head, knowing that I get to start something and I get to build it with my clients. And it's a partnership. So it's not like I have to do it on my own, which kind of helps me be like, okay, I don't feel as much like an imposter now.
Exactly. And I just wrote down what you said because I love this. You've done this before, right?
Yeah.
I think that is such an important reminder because even though the specifics may look a little bit different when we're stepping into something new, we've done this before in terms of learning something new, the pressure and anxiety of taking on something that's uncertain. And so we tend to focus on what's new about it and stress out that, oh no, I can't do this, right? Even though I've been able to successfully manage other times when I didn't know and I wasn't having no, this time is different, right? It's not different.
Yes. And I love that you said that because that, especially as a new entrepreneur, is so, I had to give myself the gift that like if you don't know it, you figure it out or you pull in a partner. It's going to be okay because we do put all that pressure on ourselves. And sometimes you'll forget when you're like, oh, this is a new client. It's a new project. Am I going to be able to do it? Am I going to live up to their standards? And it's like, well, you did a consultation. All these great things came out of it. You're excited to help them. What is the problem? Calm down. It's going to be okay.
Exactly. And I think that goes back to where we started too with where are we putting our attention? Are we putting our attention on the pieces that we haven't figured out yet? Or are we putting our attention on what we know our strengths are, the reason they're engaging us in the first place, or for the people who are working in organizations, the reason you were hired in the first place, right? That you were trusted with the responsibilities of your job. Am I focusing on that and my resourcefulness and my resilience and all of the times when I've overcome challenges in the past? Or am I focusing on what I don't know now and blowing that out of proportion and making it really difficult to problem solve and take similar approaches?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's another gift I've given myself is you're going to figure it out because do you have a choice? You have to figure it out at some point. So just sometimes you have to walk away for a little bit. Sometimes you have to take a breath. Sometimes you maybe exercise or you just give yourself a little bit of space from it. And sometimes when you come back to it, it's like a light bulb went on, or I'll wake up with ideas in the middle of the night or first thing when I wake up. And it's like, why did I make that so difficult? Why did I put all this pressure on myself? And just like that, it came back to me. So sometimes it's as simple as stepping away and really just taking that time to own where you are, own your confidence, know that you got this, and then it's okay. So even, you touched on organizations and working in an organization. So for that piece too, I feel like as an HR professional, it's important to tell people that you do have a team, you have leaders that you can lean on, you can reach out to your HR department. It's you don't have to do that alone either. And I think as employees, sometimes we can get in our own way because we think we have to be perfect. We can't let the boss down. We can't let our team down. What if I don't know something? Then we become into the situation where imposter syndrome kicks in because we think I can't do this, but you can hold yourself back so much for that. Maybe it's not speaking up in a meeting when you had something to say, but you're afraid of people judging you. And so I would just tell people to use their voice and to advocate for themselves.
I love that. And this really ties in what you're talking about too, in terms of your own work around culture. And I don't want to speak for the work that you do, but I would imagine that this is something that you're seeing, right? Like I often tie this individual experience of imposter syndrome to the larger challenge around psychological safety within organizations. And what you're talking about specifically is this idea that I don't feel safe being vulnerable. I don't feel safe speaking up when I'm not 100% sure that what I have to say has value or that it's going to land exactly as I hope it will. And some of that is internally driven, right? That maybe we just have our own stuff that we carry around with us, our own experiences that have led us to that viewpoint. And some of it is triggered by the environment because we've learned probably the hard way, right? Or by watching other people, that it's not a safe environment to do that. What's your perspective on the connection between our own personal sense of confidence and empowerment and the culture around us?
Oh my gosh, that is just like a whole bunch of power right there that you're gonna ask me to unpack. But I love it. I love culture work. I love to talk about it. And I'm so glad that you talked about psychological safety, because it's something that's often missing in the workplace, or where there's a lot of work that's left to be desired. So I myself, in my own personal experiences, I will say quite candidly that's a lot of the reason that this imposter syndrome within myself kind of built up, because it was not safe to say something. I was judged as aggressive or pushing back or challenging or negative, or all these things that we place onto people because we, be that leaders or other employees, are threatened by someone, or we feel like, well, they have something I don't. I got promoted at one point and my coworker wouldn't talk to me for a month, just out of the blue. And so if we don't help support each other and celebrate each other as teammates, then, as leaders too, we need to be doing that. But that can be a struggle. So we have to build cultures where it's safe to speak up, even if that's an opinion that differs from someone else's. That's how we build diversity. That's how we build strong cultures. That's how we build employer brands that are strong. And that is why I do the work that I do. I conversely had a situation too where I usually would speak up in meetings, and then my manager was like, I know you have more to say, but you're not saying it. And so I was kind of pushed into talking constantly when I didn't necessarily. I said, well, I'll speak up when I have something to add value to the conversation, but I don't want to just talk to talk. I also sometimes have to sit back and process in a meeting. And so she wasn't fully letting me be myself. And so that created a whole bunch of internal struggle, like, well, why am I not speaking up enough? Why am I not doing this? Why can't I be the employee that she wants me to be? And she frequently praised me. I got great feedback, but it was this push, like, you're not saying enough, you're not doing enough. And that caused internal struggle for me. Like, well, I feel like I'm talking enough. I feel like, well, why can't I say something? And then it caused me to start speaking all the time, but it was not authentic. It's back to what you said earlier. Like, I don't want to be like laughing and smiling too much, and then people don't see me as professional, or I'm talking too much and I'm just now saying stuff just to say it because I feel like I'm going to get a mark against me if I don't. And that's not a good place to be. We have to create safe environments.
Absolutely. And I think, I talk a lot about imposter syndrome individually, and that's how the conversation started for me, was really around my own experience with imposter syndrome and just how I felt in certain environments. And then as I've gotten to know it better and have talked more about it, I've really started to realize, like, gosh, that's a real threat to businesses when you've got significant chunks of people, right, for lack of a better term, who are experiencing that self-doubt, who are questioning themselves, who are not feeling safe to be vulnerable, to share their ideas, to put something new out there that maybe is in opposition to what the group is thinking about at the moment. And we tend to think about imposter syndrome or confidence as these kind of fluffy terms, and it's hard to measure. And I know in the workplace we don't really like that kind of thing, right? Going there, but there's a direct business impact when you have a bunch of people who are not speaking up. Do you see out there any attention given to this topic or to this term, or at a more macro level?
It depends. It depends on the organization. It depends on organizational readiness. And I was just having this conversation last week when I was doing a consult, because not everybody is ready. Some organizations and leaders think they're ready, but then we start going through the exercise of the deep culture work, because it is deep work. It is a commitment. It's not check the box, just like diversity. All that folds into one. And you have to commit as an organization, as a leadership team, to what you want your brand to be. And if that doesn't marry to the strategy of the organization or the mission of the organization, that can be problematic. Similarly, if you have employees who aren't feeling safe, but you're saying that you're a safe workplace, well, clearly we have a mismatch here. Something's not working right. And so it really depends on the level and where that organization is. But I would say, I think we hear the buzzwords, right? And so people gravitate towards that, and they're like, "Ooh, shiny new thing. I want that. I want to look good as an employer." But then the work fails to get done. And so that can be, and retention suffers, engagement suffers. If you're not going to allow people, you're not going to attract the right talent. So you have to be mindful of wanting just this shiny buzzword. Some people are aware of it and some are not. Some people are doing it and they're doing it well, but they just don't call it that. And then there are the organizations who are aware on some level of imposter syndrome, or that maybe something's going on in the culture, and they just kind of leave the elephant in the room and they choose not to deal with it, or say, well, I don't know why our employees aren't engaged. Well, did you ask them? Did you do the work? If you talk to your team, you would know maybe what's holding people back. And as leaders, that is our job, to support our teams, whatever that looks like.
Yes, you're so right. And there are times when it's dizzying for me, to be honest with you, because I look at the world outside of the workplace, just the general climate that we're in as a country right now here in the US, the conflicts, just the tension, the constant stress and anxiety. And I really feel like everyone needs a therapist right now. Like,
oh my gosh, yes.
brings out all of the psychological immaturity, the insecurities that we struggle with as humans, the competition, the territoriality, all of the ugliness of lack of psychological maturity, really. And I think that that's mirrored in the workplace, right? Like you talked about before, people feeling threatened. If you're a leader and you doubt yourself, you're probably going to micromanage your team a lot more than you otherwise would. You're maybe going to feel a little bit more threatened by the experts on your team who have information or experience that you don't have, because you think that they're showing you up, right? Like, there's a ripple effect that happens if we don't address this. And there's a certain responsibility, I think, that organizations have to create the right kind of culture environmentally, like we're talking about, to promote psychological safety and vulnerability. But it all starts with us. And, I think just taking a look in the mirror and saying, how am I engaging? How am I showing up every day? What can I do to strengthen my own confidence, my own sense of I have value to offer to this organization. So, I'm not going to live in constant fear. And it takes us full circle right back to where we started, with really understanding our own strengths. Do you have tips or tricks that you use to stay connected to your strengths? Is there anything that you would suggest to people who are out there really focused on the negative that, they can start to put into practice to get more connected to their strengths?
Sure. So from an HR perspective, one of those things, and this helped me a lot earlier in my career, is taking the feedback that you're getting from your leader in a performance review, what your peers are saying about you, going out and seeking information, 360-degree feedback, and just asking people, how am I doing? If we constantly seek feedback, then we'll know where our opportunities are, but we also get to see where we're truly shining. And what happens when you do that is you find that people will start coming to you with just, a lot of times they will anyway, but if you go out and ask for it and people know that you're open to it, you'll get feedback pouring in, and you will find that you've impacted people in ways, positive ways that you didn't even realize. It happens to me all the time. LinkedIn is a great example. I will get people in my direct messages all the time who are like, I've been following you for 3 months and you're really so inspirational and impactful. And I'm like, oh, like that's what I strive for, right? But it really goes a long way. Like one could say it strokes the ego. Of course it does. But I think that, I'm a servant leader. And so it's important for me to add value. And if you know the value that you're giving and you know those strengths, you're able to own them. So I think even if you can't see that within yourself, seek out the feedback of others, and they will tell you all the great things that you're doing that you may not even recognize. I think too, just owning your voice and making sure that you're confident in the spaces that you're in. I, for one, did not ever used to like to do presentations and such, and now I'm doing videos and all these things. But that's what happens when we open up some space for ourselves and we allow ourselves to fully flourish as we can. And maybe that looks like, hey, I'm not great at presentations. Let me go out and gain some of those skills. Sometimes just leveling up will help with those things too, so that we're not feeling like we're this imposter who can't do this, because maybe the only missing link is that we just need a little bit more training, or we need to pull in a mentor. Mentorship is another thing that I'm super passionate about. And so pulling in a mentor can help with that too, because they too will showcase all the things that you shine, and they can help you where maybe there is some opportunity.
I love that. I love the feedback piece. I think that's such an important part too, because we have such a limited view of ourselves when we don't seek out the feedback, and we don't realize all the things that other people see in us that we don't see. And also, I love what you're saying too about how sometimes it's as simple as just getting a little bit more training, and we get tangled up in the anxiety around not being good enough and not having what we need. And then we can't take action in any kind of a meaningful way. We can't do anything sort of productive with that. So I think just being able to say, okay, I want to be better at X, and what's my plan for doing so, makes us feel more in control of the situation, which eases the anxiety and also helps move us forward. But if we're in this just, I'm generally not good enough, I generally don't belong in my role, right? What can you do with that?
Right. That inertia is just not a good space to be. What is back to what I said earlier, at some point you have to figure it out. And so it does us no good to just stay stuck. And that's another thing that you can do to get out of your own way, is figure out how to move forward. Even if you don't know how to do it by yourself, you have family, friends, leaderships, coworker, all these things, all these people looking up research. There's so much out there that there's really no reason that we should stay stuck. And I've been stuck. And so I don't want other people to feel that way either.
I love that. And that's been a constant theme too, just in my recent conversations around, don't feel like you have to do it alone. There's so many people out there that want to help, that are willing to help, that can be a resource to you in areas that you don't necessarily even want to master or have expertise in, because that's an area where I struggled in my own personal battle with imposter syndrome, was feeling like I had to know everything. And first of all, it's an impossible expectation, like we've been talking about all along, but also it's like the effort to learn things that don't necessarily interest me, that aren't in alignment with my job description, right? That are taking away from what I really want to do and be good at. It's just not worth it. And so instead of getting in this place where we put all this pressure on ourselves to be perfect, to know everything, to do everything, no, there's people out there who that's what they love to do. So go out there, find them, and you get to focus on what you do well.
Oh my gosh, so perfect. That's another gift that I've given myself in entrepreneurship is, guess what? You don't have to know it all. Like I said, pull in a partner, or, it severely takes down the level of imposter syndrome when you know that there are people out there who do the things that don't bring you joy, and where you don't want to spend your effort or time, and they're great at it and they can do a much better job at it. So you can do that together. You don't have to do it all. I think sometimes as entrepreneurs too, you feel like there's all this pressure that you have to, but you don't. That's the beauty of it.
Exactly. So what motivated you to want to tell your story today? What are you hoping people will take away from this?
I do love a good story, first of all. But and I celebrate a lot other people's stories, and I talk a lot about people using their voice and celebrating each other and owning your stories, sharing your stories, because we all learn from each other, and we learn from hearing other people's stories, whether that's what we should do or could do better maybe, or what we don't want to do. And so kind of that's what was very motivating for me, is I've listened to other episodes. I learned so much from them. It validates, like, I'm not the only one who feels this way sometimes. And so I really wanted to just come on and share my stories in hopes that it helps other people.
I'm so glad you did, Tiffany. This has been really fun talking to you, as always. And I really appreciate your insights. I think that you've given us a lot to think about, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thanks again for listening today. If you're struggling with imposter syndrome and you'd like additional support, check out the show notes for more resources or contact me directly. I would love to help you. And if you'd like to tell your story, I would love to interview you. You will find my contact info in the show notes, so reach out anytime. Thanks again.